We spoke about the ultimate location to be in the most objective position to make a correct evaluation based on your understanding and analysis. You should be at that midpoint. Now, the question is, how do you get to that midpoint? We're all born with certain natural predilections, tendencies, characteristics, traits, and those traits interfere with this balance. So we have to get on balance. How do we get on balance? Rambam says, Ketzad yargul otzro b'Deios elat shikvubo. How does one condition himself in all these various appropriate tendencies or characteristics, traits, until it becomes second nature to the person? Yaseh v'yishne v'shalesh b'masim. It's through repetition. Once, twice, three times, through actions. Shoseh al pi Deios emtsoyos. Based on that equidistant point, even though naturally you're off to the right, left, or extremely off, get to that midpoint. And when you're at that midpoint, even though it's going against the grain, just keep repeating it. And if you repeat something enough, ultimately it becomes second nature. The Azuvim Tomid, Achumasem Kalimolov. You repeat it to the point on a continuous basis until the action, you no longer have resistance. You do it naturally. Torach Olov. Without any difficulty. It's not a burden. Now, sometimes it's like lifting a boulder, pushing a boulder up a mountain, because it's going against the grain. However, once you become conditioned and becomes part and parcel of your behavior, it becomes easy. There's no difficulty. And these traits, these predilections, these perspectives become set in your soul, in your emotion, in your mindset. Everything in life is conditioning. The more you repeat, the more you're involved, it becomes second nature. I'll give you an example. There's an expression. He could take this on with his hands tied behind his back. That's only after years of experience. That literally, with the least amount of effort, you're able to understand whatever the issue is and have to deal with it properly. Initially, when you start off as a novice, as an amateur, you have to continuously reevaluate to make sure it's right. And you have to consult, and sometimes you have to get a second opinion to know whether you're on the right track. But once you've already been conditioned and it's been proven that your understanding is correct, then it comes without difficulty. In the morning, we have the blessings of the morning. We thank God, we acknowledge God that we were born Jews. We're not slaves, we're not Gentiles. We're able to see. There are all kinds of blessings we say in the morning. They're known as the blessings of the morning. And we conclude those blessings with Hagomel Chasadim Tovim Lamo Yisrael. God does good kindness with his people Israel. Hagomel Chasadim Tovim. He does not just Chesed, Chasadim Tovim, loving acts of kindness which are good, which are beneficial with his people Israel. But we start off that blessing, we say, it should be the will of God. If you open the Siddur, you take a look. What's the word? Regilus. It should come with, it's interesting. In Hebrew, regilus means regularity. In English, we're regular. It should be regular. Meaning, when we study Torah, it shouldn't come with any level of pushback. We should naturally just glide into it. Why? Because once it becomes part of our routine, there's no pushback, there's no resistance. Now, he had said that assuming these various characteristics, how do we know they're special? Because we find God identifies with these characteristics. Merciful, precise, he says, these various appellations, God is referred to by these appellations, and this is considered the mid approach, the midpoint. If a person walks the equidistant location, that's where you leave your life, you're walking the path of God. Because we're emulating, that's the way God deals with existence. This is what Avram Avinu taught his children. A parent has an obligation to educate his child and to condition him and to live a lifestyle which is what? Which is appropriate. What's appropriate? Derech Hashem, the way of God. Hashem says, why am I giving this blessing? Because I know you will companion your children. Maybe Tova Broch Latzmo. And one who walks on this path, which is the equidistant path, because it's the path of Hashem, you will bring good and blessing to yourself. Hashem says to Avram, God brought upon Avram all that he spoke to him. Meaning, if you follow this path, because this is what you teach your children, that is the Jewish perspective, therefore all that I said will come upon you. You know, there's a statement in the Talmud that it quotes a verse that the verse says that a person's face has to be similar. It says that kol hanitzach lebrios, one who's needed by people. Your face changes many colors. Meaning, so literally the way it's understood, that God forbid a person has to come on to people and you become a ward of society, there's tremendous levels of embarrassment. So your face will turn many colors of embarrassment. And my mother, blessed memory, used to say, I should never come on to anyone. You know, when the moment I have to come on to my children, to anyone, I don't want to live any longer. I want to be independent in every aspect of my life. I don't want to come on to my children. I don't want to come on to anyone. Once you have to come on to people and they feel you're a burden and people react and they comment on it, there's a degree of what? Of embarrassment. So when you are needy and you have no choice but to come on to people, your face changes many colors, meaning the many levels of embarrassment. That's a simple understanding. However, the Chassam Sofer doesn't explain it this way. He explains it. When a person is needed by people, meaning, let's say, a person is a rabbi in a community, and he's needed by many of his constituents, and he has to advise, and he has to guide them. And at the times he has to rein in on them. You have different kinds of personalities. You have a personality because the person is self-centered and pompous. You have to be very stern with that person. You have to act tough. Another person is soft and gentle. You deal with that person differently. So this person who is in the position of leadership, and he interacts with people, each, could you hold one moment, please? A person is self-sufficient in every sense of the word. Physically, you could shop for yourself, you could make telephone calls for yourself, you could go out to do whatever you have to do. Financially, nobody has to help you. You're self-sufficient in every aspect of that. Person gets older. The parent who initially provided for the children is not able to provide any longer, not for the children, not even for themselves. No, person gets Social Security, doesn't cover. So the children have to come into play, which is okay, maybe. And then after it's the children, after a while, the parent makes certain requests. And the children get a little testy with the parent. Because they make the parent feel that they're a burden. Unfortunately, that's the way it is. You know, there's a famous expression, one parent has room for 10 children. 10 children don't have room for one parent. That's the way it is. So when a person feels that he's a burden on his family and his children, you know what the person feels? If that's the case, I prefer not to be a burden. And if it means that I will no longer be alive, I prefer not to be alive any longer. Because life is to feel valued at a certain minimal level, but even that you don't have, what's the point of continuing? That's the meaning of that expression. It's like you become a ward of the state. You lose your identity. You lose your sense of value. If they value you for your advice, you know, there used to be an expression today, unfortunately, it's a rare commodity. It's called sage wisdom. There used to be such a thing as sage wisdom. Today you got sage. You know, you pick it up in the health food store. You could buy sage. You can find it in a nursing home. You can find sage. But the sage that was a sage, those sages you don't find any longer because those sages are synonymous with wisdom. And that wisdom, unfortunately, as they say, is a rare commodity. So when a person gets older and the family, the children, the grandchildren, great-grandchildren, and they always call that grandmother to consult with her, to pick up brains, so to say, and invite her, and they're all fighting to have her as the guest. That grandmother feels she has the world. She's the most fortunate woman because all her children, her family, they adore her, they value her, they revere her. Every basis for feeling value, it's worth living that woman has. She may have arthritis, she may have difficulty walking, but if she is valued by her family, she has everything in the world. I remember my mother, Lao Shalom, she was in assisted living. She was older. And I would come every single night. It was up in Rockland County in Muncie. I would come every single night with my children who were at home still to visit my mother every single night. And my mother, she would eat like in the dining room, this assisted living. She had a kitchen in her apartment, but there was a dinner and breakfast she could eat together with the other people, all older people. And she would tell the women, most of them were women, because they were all widows, that she's a very wealthy woman. She has diamonds that there's no diamonds that compare to her diamonds. And they thought she meant jewelry. And when I would come in with my children, she'd say, those are my diamonds. And after a while, the other women, their children used to pick them up. Thanksgiving, they pick them up to take them to dinner or to lunch. I would come every single night. And after a while, the women, they became envious of my mother. Here she has all this attention. Her grandchildren giving her attention. Every night I come to visit her. For weekends, I bring her to my home. Every Shabbos, she spent Shabbos with us. And she was the center of attraction with my children. Even my married children would come. And her great-grandchildren. And, you know, she was actually valued. The other women were getting jealous. You know? They're lucky if they get one phone call a week from their families. And here, day in and day out, with all this attention. So she was concerned about the evil eye. That the other women, they could give what we call ayin hara, an evil eye. So she said to me, do me a favor, come through the back door. Don't come through the front door. They don't have to see you coming up. You come back up the elevator in the back, so you shouldn't see. But that was her, what we call her pride and joy and hanachas. That's what it was. But a person doesn't have that. What do you have to show for life? You put it on the shelf, and they're waiting to make sure that the executive for the estate is in place, and the will is written, and they got a copy of the will, that when it's time to do the graveside burial, they're going to cash in. That's what they're waiting for, unfortunately. Mom, but I just saw you 3 months ago. Okay? We're going to put you in a mausoleum. So whenever we want to go see, we just pull out the drawer, we can look at you. You understand? If that's what kind of children you have, something. Thank you, no thank you. That's the way it is. When God created this world, he created the world with a specific intent. The world should be used as he wants it to be used. Now it's our choice. Do you use the world, do you use the material of the world? Do you invest it in his glory? Meaning, do you abide by what he wants to do his will? Or do you go and you use what he created, which is called a misuse? That's not the original intention of that, the usage of that. Although he gives you plenty of leeway. You can turn your back and still he gives you all the material. But again, because otherwise people wouldn't have choice. If God would react and withdraw immediately, so the person would have a clear understanding that if you use it properly, it's available. If not, God withdraws it. But if you go and use and invest your life as God wants you to invest it, what are you doing? You're a representation of God's will. And that's what the Rambam says. What is Derech Hashem? What is the way of God? That equidistant point, being balanced. And because you have that balance, you have a level of objectivity that now you can make a correct decision rather than being biased. As God is not biased. Whatever God does, it's because when he chooses to be kind, indiscriminately kind, that's the choice. That's a decision. It's not because he's biased to be kind. He's kind when he chooses to be kind. When he has mercy, he chooses that mercy. And when he reigns in and this exactness and judgment, he chose that. But that's all because everything God does is with that absolute level of clarity. You want to have a semblance of that clarity, then you walk that straight and narrow path, which is straight down the middle. So if you do walk that path, how are you utilizing existence? In what context are you actually living your life? That's called Derech Hashem. That is the way of God. Well, people believe that God-fearing, and they are God-fearing. But the way they live their lives was that literally there's a lack of order. As a result of that lack of orderliness, they're not living their life the way God wants them. They believe it. Many people believe. Sometimes, certain people are into order. You have order. You walk into a store and you have inventory, and every item is on a shelf, marked and defined. You walk in, now you know what to pick and choose from. But let's say you walk in, everything's just a disarray, what they used to call a hodgepodge. You have to go through 6 layers of something to find something. You can't even appreciate what it is. You don't see what it is. There's mass confusion. When you have mass confusion, you don't even know what you're looking at. A person can have a life. He believes that he gets it, but it's the equivalent of mass confusion. Sometimes you walk into houses. There used to be a Jewish word. They used it in Europe. It was called the Hegdish. Looks like a Hegdish. You ever hear that expression? Hegdish. Why was it called the Hegdish? In Europe, the communities, they provided residence for the poor. where poor people would visit a community. It was like a communal residence, and poor people, wherever they've come from, they provided food there, sleeping arrangements. But you realize the upkeep was impossible because it was used round the clock. Poor people poured in there, they had nothing. And the place was a disaster. No orderliness, no cleanliness, nothing. They called it a hegdish. It was called hegdish because it was designated like somebody consecrates something. It was consecrated for that. But you walked in there, it like total chaos. Nothing was in order. Things were broken, things weren't clean, things were lacking. You had a chair with 2 feet rather than four legs on it. That was a hegdish. Sometimes you go into a person's house, things are so unorderly. Sometimes you're taking, how do people function in this house? You look at a bookcase, the books are upside down, backwards. How do you find a book in this house, in this library? And the bindings are torn off. Where are we going? Well, I got to take out every book and look inside, and half the pages are missing. You understand? That's not what it's all about. But if you live a life of orderliness, what we call Seder, and you're at the equidistant point, then we could talk about Chesed, and we could talk about mercy. We could talk about everything. Now, before we start the next chapter, I just want to know if there are any comments.